Hey everybody, my name is Jonathan Core, and in today's marketing talk, I have the pleasure of speaking to the business development director for a SaaS company called Wordfly. My guest today, Kirk Bentley, has 14 years of sales, marketing, and customer success experience working on the product side, specifically at Wordfly, but then also too in the agency space. He is also a public speaker, phenomenal recording artist. I highly suggest you check his stuff out. And on the board of Shunpike. Thanks for hopping on this call, Kirk.
You bet. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me today.
Awesome. Well, let's kick this off. Right now we're in the middle, and honestly, I don't even know where we're at within the pandemic.
What day is it, man? I don't know.
What day is it? And so it's kind of hard to say, the end in sight and all these, just with everything that's going on. And so I want you to start off. I know that we had a very interesting conversation specifically working with Wordfly, but I want to ask you, how has COVID-19 and the pandemic been for you personally? And then also too, just as a business development director for Wordfly?
Boy. Yeah, that's a big one to kick things off with. You're going for gold here. Well, it's been crazy, quite honestly. One thing, that your watchers and your viewers and listeners, might be interested in is that Wordfly, that's a software marketing tool built specifically for the arts and entertainment world. And so when we talk about that, we are talking about over 600 of the world's best theaters, symphonies, museums, attractions, sports teams. And so, those are largely pretty much shut down right now. So it's been really interesting to watch what those organizations have been doing during this time and how they've had to pivot. And it's been really inspiring. Yeah, like a lot of folks, I think at the beginning of this, kind of March, right around there, we had really no concept of how long this was going to last, what a big impact it would have on the world. But pretty quickly after that, we saw probably 95% of our customers close their doors. And a lot of them have had to, furlough staff or cut staff. So that's created a pretty interesting situation. And what's been really fascinating, though, is watching how our product has really remained a vital part of their marketing stack. And Wordfly is a product that does email marketing. It does forms, landing pages, SMS. And, as it turns out, all of those things are critically important when you can't open your doors and invite people into your venue. So it's been really interesting to see, how they've used the product differently, how they've changed their use of email and things like that. For us as a team, it's been a bit of a change, but not entirely. We're a fairly small team, Wordfly, depending on the depending on when you talk to us, there's usually between 15 and 20 people on our team. A lot of those folks are based in Seattle, but, a good chunk of them are now also based in our Costa Rica office. So we have an office down in Costa Rica, and we've got a fantastic crew of, I think it's like 7 or 8 of us now are down there. So that's, we've been working remote in that sense for several years now. So, but it's definitely a transition. Most of us in the Seattle office and in the Costa Rica office too. We all go to the office. So just like everyone else, just learning how to work from home and dealing with that and carving out a space. I'm fortunate to have this pretty sweet little office / recording studio behind me here. So it could be a lot worse, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. And so I have a question just to unpack this a little bit more, because you're my first guest that actually, specifically the target audience or the customers that you work with that were drastically, affected, like you were mentioning, just event space and obviously theaters, museums, all these. So I'm curious, from a business development director standpoint, how did you approach the conversation? How did you have the conversations with your customers? How did you approach being empathetic, especially during this time, working with different venues and locations?
Yeah. And I'm really glad you asked that. We thought a lot about that, and I'm a marketer, but I'm also a salesperson, and it's my belief that sales and marketing are a lot more intertwined than I think a lot of us believe them to be. And so we kind of act, using that ideology going forward. And so, the first thing that we did, what I decided to do on the sales team was to just basically stop outbound sales. We weren't going to do any cold emailing or cold calling or, anything like that, at least until we figured out, what was going on here. Because, the last thing that people want during a crisis is someone to say, hey, do you want to buy this? Can we talk to you about this solution or this platform? That's not what was important, and it would just been a really clueless, kind of mindless effort on our part, I think, to jump in and to continue doing those sorts of things. So we put a hold on that. And I think for a lot of the folks that were already talking to us, it was interesting because it seemed like there became a new kind of urgency behind completing the sale. So, and getting up and running on Wordfly, getting things started, and getting the emails created and out the door, getting a platform for SMS to message people, which totally makes sense. I think I didn't quite anticipate that, but we're actually not that far off the pace in terms of our sales right now. So, I think a lot of folks have used this sort of downtime. If you're at a theater, there's no productions going on. There may not, if you're at a museum, there may not be any guests coming in, although that's changing a little bit in New York and a few other places. So some of our, contacts and folks who are, in the prospecting mode, they just kind of pushed things along and maybe moved along a little bit faster. And so now, now we're starting to see, I think a lot of people have sort of landed on this as our new normal. And, the idea of a salesperson or someone, an account person reaching out to talk about your account or renewing your subscription, that seems okay now. And so I think especially for 2021, we're definitely in a much more of a growth mindset now. And I think everyone is, I think it does start to feel like, especially now that, at least in North America, with school starting back up, summer's ending, and people want to get back to normal. And part of that is capitalism and the buying and selling of products. So I think that hopefully, there'll be a vaccine sooner than later. But I think until then, I think most folks are going back to, as best as they can, some sort of business as usual, including us.
Yeah, that's really encouraging to hear, specifically what you were talking about with the sales piece of just, pausing outbound and really just kind of
Mhm.
like, in a sense, reading the room, but in a more global scale for you guys specifically. Cause I mean, I can imagine, like you mentioned, I was listening to a podcast a few months ago, and they were talking about how certain people are still approaching sales with lack of like awareness of what's going on. And so I think it's very crucial. I think
Yeah.
it allows for you to foster a longer term relationship, because this is a long term play and approach specific to right now during this pandemic. So I'm really glad you shared that. I want to segue us really into what the goal of this podcast is, which is to
Mhm.
really walk through your career in marketing and really just in general. So I want to rewind the clock back to your undergrad. So you
Yeah.
ended up studying communication, specifically advertising, and that's what you ended up majoring in for your
Yep.
undergrad. My question is, what was your reasoning? What was your rationale behind that back then when you were going through your undergrad grad?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me go in the Wayback Machine here a little bit, but I was a creative outsider as a kid, in high school, and I did not gravitate to subjects like science or math very well, but I came from a real creative background. My father was kind of a wild and crazy artist. And so I was always around that kind of, that vibe. He always was, creating and making and painted these huge canvases and always was dreaming and had big ideas. And he worked, his day job was, as an architect and, commercial interior design. On the other hand, my mom, worked in the banking and the finance industry. So as I got older and, got into university, I realized that advertising was actually the perfect blend of both of those sides of me. The art and the finance. It really made sense to me, and it felt like I had finally found something that really encompassed both of these parts of me, because those are still, two things I'm really interested in, is business and creativity and art. So I think, and of course, there was, whenever you go to university, there's all kinds of interesting subjects, philosophy and all kinds of stuff you study, which I was also really interested in, literature. But that seemed to be the thing that I was most passionate about. And so, yeah, just kind of as luck would have it, Washington State University has a fantastic communications program. I didn't really go there because of that. But it turned out that, the Edward R. Murrow School of Communication there is world renowned, and it's just fantastic. And I had some amazing professors and teachers there who really showed me, I think, what real advertising is. So it was a great experience, and that's a fantastic school. I love my time there.
That's awesome. And I'm really, really, like, you have no idea. I'm really glad you mentioned about the business and creativity, or in this case, you and I
Mhm.
connected on music, business and music. It's not necessarily music and
Yeah.
business. It's just you like both of those realms. And so I 100% agree. Marketing and advertising specifically, I feel like is a blend of both of those. And like now it's become so broad where there's so many
Yeah.
other ways to be creative within that specific within marketing specifically.
Yeah, and that's and I think I was definitely, I think when you're a little younger, you're definitely more maybe enticed by the fantasy of like, ooh, I could go to a job where I could create all day and write, words and make, cool images and go to photo shoots, and it is some of that stuff. That's definitely part of marketing and advertising. But I think the part that I, didn't quite really grasp until later on to my career was really how critical marketing on the business side is, and what a key part of introducing a new product, or really even, in the SaaS model, this whole kind of like sort of new idea of product marketing, of continuing to resell the product, every day to your customers through actual marketing, and also customer success, and content marketing, and knowledge bases and things like that. So, that part I kind of took a little bit longer to glob onto, because, I think, yeah, when you're looking at careers like, wow, this is great, you just hang around and, we're going to take photos and make cool ads and stuff like that. And it is that, but there's got to be strategy behind it. And the folks that, hold the purse strings, they're definitely going to want to know that those cool pictures you're putting together are going to turn a profit, or get new customers, or get new leads or something.
For sure. So it's interesting. You graduated in communications from
Mhm.
WSU, and shortly after that, you eventually venture off into working for an award-winning recording studio, working with companies or agencies like DDP, McCann, Publicists,
Yeah.
and agencies like that. So my question is, how or why did you land in a recording
Yeah. How did that
agency?
happen? Yeah, it was pretty wild. So I had studied music a lot, in elementary and grade school, and all through high school, and played in bands in college, and actually that was a really profitable side gig for me, because I would play all the big parties with my band. We had a big cover band, and so we would make some pretty good spare change doing that. And I had really been into recording and wanted to kind of pursue a career in recording for bands, and just get involved in that in any way I could. But I knew I'd have to have, a regular job as well. But I wasn't having a whole lot of luck getting into the ad world in Seattle. It was kind of like, mid to late 90s, kind of the heydays of agencies, a lot of money, a lot of big agencies moved into Seattle. There's, a lot going on, and it was competitive, and, I couldn't find my way into that. But I had gotten to know some folks in the post-production world. And so, yeah, I went and scored myself kind of a part-time gig at Pure Audio, which is right down in Belltown. It's a really cool spot. And then I kind of parlayed that into a full-time gig. And I worked there for almost 10 years doing a lot of post-production work for all the biggest ad agencies in town. And so it was kind of cool to be working with agencies and seeing how they worked kind of from a different perspective. And, we worked on all the biggest campaigns, Car Toys and Publicis was there, DDB, McCann, anyone who was anyone in Seattle was coming through Pure Audio. And, we had a fantastic business going on there, and it was just like a little family. It was really fun, and we did all kinds of stuff. I was doing copywriting and even some voiceover here and there, writing jingles. So it was really neat. It was different than what I had kind of planned, I think, but nonetheless incredibly exciting. Just so fun. I couldn't even believe every day I was going to work there. It was just unreal.
That's awesome. And so you said you
Yeah.
had a 10-year run there.
Just about, yeah.
Yeah. So would you mind describing, your transition from there and then eventually landing in pop? What was that? What was that season? What was that phase like for you?
Woo, yeah. That was another kind of wild ride. I think whenever you do these sort of career transitions, or there's a, a little break, things can get weird. So yeah, basically, Pure Audio was doing great, and we were on a big run. Probably, easily the second, first or second most popular studio in Seattle. And we had 3, sometimes 4 rooms just going all the time, full just all day, sometimes late into the night. And then this thing called the first.com bust happened. And that was probably, I don't know, right, the mid to early 2000s. Things went south really quickly, and a lot of our business that we were getting from the agencies dried up, and I got laid off. So probably a lot of people right now can relate to that. And so that was a moment where, I had kind of recently gotten married, and my wife and I were just trying to figure out, okay, what's next? What are we going to do? If I was going to continue and expand my career in recording and as an engineer, it's pretty clear I'd have to go to New York or LA. That was the choice. And, we weren't really ready to do that. We really liked our life here. And I think, really, honestly, I was probably just, pretty scared to go and jump into that world. I wasn't quite ready for it. So I started looking around for gigs here. I was still playing in bands and recording and doing all that stuff. And, I was trying to figure out just what my next move was going to be. I actually, for a little while there, for a few months, opened my own kind of like creative boutique called The Hair Salon. And that was, I would write jingles or do copywriting or things like that. But I just, I wasn't quite ready to run my own business, and just not very serious about it. So that didn't go too far. But what ended up happening was, Pop, the agency I work at now, who is the parent company of Wordfly, they were a client at Pure Audio, and they came in, and I worked with those guys a lot. And we did voiceovers for video games, or back in those days when websites had audio on them, a lot of pops and clicks and bubbles and stuff like that. And so when I got laid off, I started to give those guys a call and say, hey, you got any work I could do, audio work or anything else? And it was kind of no, not really, that's not going on. But they did eventually call me back and say, hey, we've got this new thing we're working on. It's a tool that sends email, and we're going to market it directly to, basically music venues, theaters, symphonies, orchestras, museums, And, with your background in, recording and music and as a performer and entertainer, would you be interested in coming and joining the team at Pop to help us grow this thing and build it? So I was going to join as kind of the head, salesperson, and also accounts person. So they had a handful of accounts that they were going to get up and running on this system. Maybe 15 or 20, but some pretty big names. And so, yeah, I came on, and I mean, look, I was a techie, but in a really different way. I knew about recording engineering and audio and sound and decibels and, all that whole world. I did not know about HTML and CSS and, JavaScript or any of that stuff. And I definitely didn't know, that you could like design a fancy email and send it to anyone and, use your own different address or anything. So, and all of us were pretty clueless. It was pretty funny. It was early days of SaaS. We didn't even call it SaaS. There was not a thing, So I came on board. There was 3 other folks, head software architect. We had, our designer, and then sort of like a product owner, the boss of all of us. And we were a crack team inside the agency working on this, kind of super secret project that, we didn't really hang out with the rest of the agency that much. So it was really fun, and it was such a different thing for me. It was totally a different, line of work. It's really a big change. There's no audio at all, really. I did make a few, early kind of like training videos and things like that. So I got to flex that muscle a little bit. But I did find that, one of the things, when you're working as a post-production engineer in a recording studio, and there's high stress ad agency executives in your studio for 8 or 10 hours a day, you get used to a lot of intense pressure. And I found that really served me well because, those recording sessions could often be very stressful, really long, no bathroom breaks, no lunch breaks, really extreme, intense working conditions with people who were often, sometimes ad agency people and execs, they can be a little eccentric. And so that could be a little intense too. But I found that training really served me well. And I was able to use that to handle some of these really big accounts and manage those accounts really well and sell to people really well and convince people to use this product. So I found that, both that experience and my experience, since being a kid, getting up on stage and playing music and performing and singing, all of that really, I realized that's sales training right there. That kind of activity, getting up there and doing that, when you're singing a song to people, you're really kind of in a way trying to convince them to like that song and like you. And so I found all of that to be incredibly valuable when I moved into this new position at Pop. And it's really served me well, so my time at Pure Audio and my time as, as kind of a more full-time musician has really been something that I fall back on a lot. I think I learned a lot from business about, I learned a lot about business from being in a band and, having to market a band and sell records and all that stuff. So anyway, so that's kind of maybe more to the story than you need to hear, but yeah, it was a pretty wild time and a little rough. It's not easy changing careers, but boy, it's best choice I ever made was coming on board with Pop. It was great.
So what's 1 or 2 pieces of advice you would like when you were mentioning how you were laid off during the .com bust? During that era, I'm sure there was a lot of confusion, maybe fear, maybe so many things going in your mind. And so like my question to you is like, what would you tell someone now who has been furloughed, or what advice would you give to them as far as how they're processing, how they're looking at making the next move, whatever that is? What would you tell them? 1 or 2 things?
Yeah. I think for folks who are going through that right now, especially if you're getting, I'll direct this to folks who are just getting started in their career. I think it's important, to be humble and to be willing to do things that maybe you aren't sure that you're quite good at, or because you're probably better than you think. And there's a lot of people, and especially in marketing. I think a lot of us think, oh well, I'm not an expert at every single part of marketing. I can't, I don't know everything about AdWords or email marketing or SEO. There's a lot of different parts of marketing, and even though you may not think you're an expert, you probably know more than most people. So don't undersell yourself. I think that if you decide to go freelance, make sure that you don't cut your rate down too low, because that's a slippery slope, and it's hard to get it back up there if you start underselling yourself. So watch out for that. And I think if you're going to look around for work and look for a job, expand that search. There's probably a lot of, just like for me, I did not intend to go out there and be in business development or, have a sales career. But that's something that I found I really enjoyed. So I think it's important to be open-minded, and I think as a young man getting into the job market and kind of, being into music and rock and roll and rebellious, the idea of being in sales was really antithetical to me. But I've realized now as I'm older that, those things aren't really that different. So I think, it's just important to take a beat, be open-minded. And I think while it's always important in life to, I think, try to figure out what you want, it's always important to remember that most people don't care what you want. They want what they want. And you need to figure out how you can be valuable for somebody else.
Yep, that. There's a lot of wisdom there. I'll personally take, and that's why I wanted to really ask that question. I know that people going through a layoff. I would say right now it's more. This is an outlier. So it's sort of like nobody expected this, and so but people do go through being laid off or fired, stuff like that throughout their careers, and so I think it's always important to address it. I think just be able to be open about it. It is hard. Like I've seen more and more people on LinkedIn, be more and more open about being laid off and stuff like that. And it's really encouraging because, a lot of other people are like, hey, I also recently went through that, and what you're saying resonates with me. So it helps, one, to have your perspective, just what you went through, but then also two, to share the wisdom. Like, how did you go through that? Because like sometimes in the midst of it, it's just like you don't see any. It's all cloudy. It's all uncertain. It's like, hey, well, what am I gonna like? You start questioning everything, and so I think that advice and tips you were giving are really, really.
And I'll say one other thing about that too is back in my day, this was a little different because we didn't really have, LinkedIn wasn't quite so much a thing when I got that job at Pop, like 14 years ago. But make sure that you really got to use those contacts. It turns out that, going to Washington State University, I ended up like a lot of the people at Pop that I work with now, they had also gone to school there, and we were all Cougs. And that turned out to be a thing. It wasn't what got me the job, but it was a thing to talk about. It was a connection that we had. It was a shared experience that we had. The more you can find those things, the more you can show that you're in the club with somebody else, that you're in the same club as someone else. It just makes it more appealing to reach out to you. So look for those connections and those shared experiences, I think, is another thing.
Yep, that's great advice. So one of the things I noticed in your career, really on your LinkedIn, is you have obviously experience in sales. You just mentioned that, marketing, as an account executive, customer experience, like really just like the end-to-end customer journey experience specifically for you. So my question to you is, how has your kind of array of experience in different departments within an organization allowed for you to really understand your customers and what really matters to them when it comes to using the end product, which is Wordfly?
Yes. Oh, I love this question. I am bonkers crazy about like I don't even like the words customer journey, but because I know there's a better word for it. And I know when I'm a customer, I don't feel like I'm on a journey. But we all know what we're talking about. So whatever, I won't get semantic about it, but I am absolutely obsessed with the customer journey. I just like the whole concept of what happens in your brain when you see an ad or you're introduced to a product or a service somehow, and then that actually incites you to actually check them out or reach out or click a button or send an email to them. And the moment that that whole thing happens, really, it happens with that marketing. But generally, I think of it as when that first phone call happens, or that first conversation on Zoom, or that first in-person conversation at the booth at an event. To me, that is your whole company right there. Like that moment of how they think of you and that interaction with that person, that's everything to me. And so if it's gross and your salespeople are gross and garbagey and sleazy and don't feel human, then I'm not into that. So everyone has to be really human and really caring and kind and be a real genuine person. And I just can't get down with any of these kind of just the sleazy kind of sales techniques. It's just totally outdated. And was it ever even in date? I don't know. It just who wants that? Nobody wants that. You want a real person who is a good person, who knows their stuff, who will explain to you and help you solve your problem. And the whole company is really, it should be just focused around that.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good insight. And I like one of the things you initially said just about being human and about, not trying to be a snake oil salesman, that approach, just trying to get,
Yeah.
just trying to, I guess, meet your quota or whatever it is that you're incentivized to do. And no, you're actually looking to help and looking for the best interest of your customer. So I'm really glad you touched on that piece. And then also too, just talking about how misaligned sometimes some SaaS companies are, because, you check the box for this, and then they go into this section. It's all, although it is a part of the funnel or however their whole process, their onboarding process, the misalignment might, confuse, or, there might be some things lost within the process.
Do you ever just, kind of like go along and take a sales call, just for fun, just to see kind of where it goes? I always do this, like, a big SaaS company or someone will want to book a meeting with me, and I'm always so curious. So I do it, and I just like cannot believe what I hear and see sometimes. I mean, man, I feel for the sales reps and the account execs out there, because they're clearly not getting the training they need on the product. They oftentimes hardly even know what it does or don't know all the features. And then if I want a demo, you've got to go through like 2 or 3 phone calls to get a demo. They're not just going to show you what it does and how it works. And even when you get a demo, you're not guaranteed that the person showing it to you really knows the true value proposition of like what it can do for your business. So I get it. Like these are huge companies. Some of these billion-dollar companies, there's lots of people who want to use those products. And so it's tough, but I do wish that, we could see a little more humanistic approach to some of this stuff, because it's pretty disappointing and it's off-putting to me. It makes me not want to use those products.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. I think 6 months ago, I decided to take a sales call too with this company. I won't say what it is or who they are, but basically I went through the whole process. It took me 2 or 3 calls to finally get a demo.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. The first call was like 5 or 10 minutes. It was super quick. Like, and I'm sure it's all about intent, and, depending on if I say the buzzwords or keywords that, will allow for them to be like, oh, wow, this is a warm or hot lead, however it is they view me. But like none of the call was like the call, honestly, like I would say the 2 leading up to the demo were kind of like, I understand they're trying to understand my pain points and stuff like that, but there was no value exchange for me. So for me, I kind of felt duped of my time because I'm like, I didn't get anything out of this. It was kind of like, I don't know. And I noticed one of the things that they were asking me is like, hey, does this sound like you, or does this sound like this would solve your problem? Like they kept trying to reaffirm. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just trying to find out what your product is and does. Like that's all I'm trying to do. I don't even know. But they were really trying to kind of like nail down, hey, is this it? Is this it? It's like, I don't know.
I mean, look, our demo, our product is pretty deep, an email tool is not the simplest thing to show. There's lots to look at and understand about, how do you design a world-class email, and I know that sounds corny, but I mean, it's much more difficult than using something like Squarespace or, to design an email is much more difficult because it's got to work on hundreds of different inboxes. Whereas a site in Squarespace or Wix or whatever, WordPress, there's, 4 or 5 major browsers, right? Email is a million different ways that you could, that could render. And so, there's a lot more to think about. And then you've got all the reporting, all the clicks and the opens and the unsubscribes and the legal and the policy. And how do you import a list? How do you segment a list? It just goes on and on. It's a really deep product that you add onto that surveys, you add onto that RSVPs or landing pages. It's a lot to get through in an hour-long meeting. It really can't be done. And so, my team is so fantastic. They will, we don't mess around with really strict, like, you got to be off this call in 20 minutes or anything. If the call needs to be an hour and a half, then it's an hour and a half. And that's how we roll with it. And, because I don't know about you, but when I get on the phone with somebody, I expect that person to know every single thing about that product and to answer any crazy question I might have.
Yep. 100%.
And also size me up and understand what I know, because people come to your product. Some of them have, let's say with Wordfly, for example, they're email experts. They've been doing this for years. They have a team of 20 that they work with. They're big time marketers, some of our customers. Some of them aren't. Some of them, are first time. Maybe they're an intern or maybe they're a retired person just doing this on the side. They don't know anything. So you got to be able to size those people up really quickly and explain it in a way that that person will understand. And so for your reps, the people that are talking about your product, both at the beginning and after the sale on the customer side, they've really got to be savvy. They've really got to be savvy people. And, they've got to be able to psychologically pretty quickly figure out who this person is, and it's not easy. Not everyone is built to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think having my experience, I'm glad that you also do the same thing of, going, just hopping on sales call just to see what their whole process. No, it's interesting though. And honestly, like having this conversation, who knows, I might try and, go through a few more, just see what it's like. So there's a lot of questions that we didn't get to. So I'm going to ask you the last question before we go into the rapid fire questions, but hopefully maybe, there could, in the future, there could be a part 2, us unpacking more of the, product marketing, talking about alignment between all departments. And there's just so much we can unpack here. But, but my last question before we hit the rapid fire questions is, if you had a chance today to sit down with Kirk yourself, fresh out of Wazoo with a bachelor's in communications with emphasis in advertising, what advice would you give him based off of everything you know and have experienced now?
Oh wow, I think well, first of all, let me say I would not do a single thing differently. I don't believe in that line of thinking. Your life is a beautiful, amazing adventure, and whatever happens, man. And you got to roll with that and love it and hold it very closely to your heart because it's your experience and no one else's. So I don't get into, regrets and try to rewrite the past. However, having said that, one of the things, I think that I could have been a little, I think I wish I had been a little bit more business minded when I was in university and maybe taken a few more business classes. And to have done that, I would have had to have been a little more open minded. And the reason I was so attracted to advertising and marketing was because of the creative side of it. But I think, having gone back to school now, and gone and taken, and gotten, more business classes and a certificate in business development, and really understood where marketing fits in a business. I think, if I had learned a little bit of that ahead of time, I would have been much better at conversations with customers, much better at probably finding a role in an ad agency early on, because I wasn't really speaking the language of business. And so when I went back to the University of Washington and got my degree back there several years ago, I really understood, oh, okay, yeah, marketing is not just about the creative stuff. It's really about all of these, other parts of the business too. So I wish I had been able to focus on that a little bit more, but that's okay. I'm focused on it now, and now I understand it, so it makes more sense. But I think, yeah, and I think a lot of young people are built that way. That's what's exciting about advertising and marketing as opposed to finance, right? That's why you go into it.
Yep.
But you should learn a little bit of the finance too, because the whole point of marketing really is to grow the business, right? And if you're not thinking about that or focused on that or understand how that happens, you're not really a good marketer. If your sole job is just, you think your sole job is to write snappy copy and take cool pictures, and that's great, but you need to understand why you're doing that, because the people who are probably your boss, who pay you, or the people who are your customers who you're building that for, they do understand that, and they want you to understand that.
Yep, that's I like the ripping the bandage off, kind of ending that piece, like saying
Yeah.
that's a great way of saying it, and it's the honest truth. So I appreciate that. So I'm gonna segue us into the rapid fire, quick response
Speed
questions that
round.
we have. Yeah, the speed round.
I
And
always
so
love a
my
good speed round. I
Yep.
love
And
it. Here we
and so my first question to you is, what is your current favorite marketing tool or software that isn't Wordfly?
Okay, so this might sound kind of lame, but I really love Canva, Canva, and I'll just tell you why. Right, I know that there's probably a lot of Adobe fans out there who are like, whatever, that's poor man's Photoshop or InDesign, and maybe it is, but the technology is seriously amazing, and it's unbelievable what you can do in that product that just a few years ago you would have to use a whole suite of tools to be able to do some of that stuff. So I know it's sort of the garage band of designers, but you got to admit it does open up a whole slew of opportunities for people who are maybe not professional designers, and it's just a cool looking tool, and I love their marketing and the way that they have an app for that product, and it works on mobile too. Just the technology behind it is really, really cool. So that's kind of my favorite marketing tool of the moment.
For sure. So next question, the rapid fire questions is, what is a favorite online marketing course that you've taken up to this point?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of stuff out there. I honestly, I really like the HubSpot stuff. I think they have a really good curriculum, and I like the way it's set up. And since I'm in sales, I pay for the premium LinkedIn, and they have a fantastic program on there too. So I think there's a lot of good stuff. I think you really have to be careful too, because there's also a lot of garbage out there. And there's a lot of garbagey, just really gross sales ideas and marketing ideas out there. If you're a young marketer or sales representative, don't get lured in by this promise of like a hack or a quick trick to like blow your business out of the water. As a musician, I bet you are aware too of just like how many gross Spotify marketers are out there, trying to get you on a million playlists. That stuff is garbage and nonsense, and don't fall for it. So I would stick to the tried and true stuff, and even if you can go to an accredited university, really, that's I think best of all. I know that might sound old school, but you'll get a certificate. It'll be real. It'll be official. You'll learn real standards that you can apply for the rest of your career.
For sure. Awesome. Well, what is a favorite business or marketing book that you've enjoyed up to this point?
Okay, I have my books not far from my desk here. This is one that I keep really close by, actually. It's kind of old school. It's called The Marketing Playbook. I don't know if you've heard of this, but I love this book. And if you're in SaaS, you should check it out, because the guys who wrote it worked for Microsoft, late 90s, I think. They were intimately involved in basically bringing Office to the market, and it's fascinating. It's a really cool read, because they tell all these war stories about going head to head with all of these other companies that were in the mix with Apple. So it's really cool, and they really boil it down to 5 main techniques to sell your product and market your product. So I like it. It's definitely worth a read. It is a little older, but a lot of these techniques don't really change. And so when we're talking about techniques, and a lot of us are apt to think, oh, it's overwhelming. There's so many. There really aren't. And I think when you look at it, especially when you're talking about a software product, there's just a few that really you'll probably come back to over and over. And when you look at it, you'll realize, oh, yeah, I'm using that technique, So I'm doing a drag race. That's one of the techniques. So that's one I like.
Awesome. Cool. Well, my last question for you is, who's a favorite marketer you've either worked with or had the chance of working with, or somebody you've admired from afar?
Yeah. Okay. So I used to hate this guy. And I think a lot of people might, but I saw him speak live at a conference that I was also speaking at. And I got to tell you, the guy blew my mind. I just totally loved him. He totally transformed my perception of him. And, I'm like one of those people that, if everyone likes somebody, I'm too cool to like them. I know it's totally lame, but, so Seth Godin, and his new book is fantastic. You should go read it. It's really fun, smart, well written, and it's a piece of marketing in and of itself. But I used to think he was a little corny. But he's the guy that really came up with this whole idea of permission marketing, and that's what email is all about. If done properly, email marketing is all about getting permission and talking to people and having that permission and doing that transaction of them giving you that transaction of them giving you their email address, which is a very personal, private thing to give someone these days. And in return, what are you going to give them? A bunch of garbagey sales stuff? No, you can't do that. So I have totally changed my tune on Seth Godin. I really like him. His new book is awesome. He's a smart guy. He's a really humble and a cool guy. I come back to his stuff a lot.
Yep, Seth Godin's great. I can't always remember every story. He's really good storytelling too, and so there's so many stories I've read about 5 or 6 of his books, and they're phenomenal. So, if people are interested in connecting with you, Kirk, what are some of the best channels or means to connect with you?
Well, of course, I'm always parked on LinkedIn, so my LinkedIn browser or tab is always open on my browser, so you can always find me there. I'm on Twitter. My handle is @VeryBentley, VeryBentley. So those are probably the best places to find me. If you're interested in my music, I go by the name Missing Image. So you can find me at Missing Image 2, the number 2, or just search for Missing Image. There's not too many of us out there. So you can find me there, and I'm on Bandcamp. Same thing, Missing Image. I've got a record out that I just put out a few months ago, and I've been busy. I've got a new one coming out, hopefully by the end of the year. So just going into the mastering studio with that stuff now. So So those are a few good ways to find me. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And I would highly suggest you guys check out Kirk's recent record that he released. One of my favorite songs on the record was "Paranormal Girl," and it reminded me a lot of like if you like Beck, if you like those vibes, that Beck vibes, you'll for sure enjoy Kirk's music. So once again, thanks Kirk for coming on and sharing your knowledge, experience, your career, and resources with me and the marketing community.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks. It's always fun and flattering to be asked. So thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And again, yeah, if any folks out there have questions about how to get started in marketing or where they should go next in their career, always happy to chat with you folks. So just ping me and let me know.